When you are drawing in one-point perspective, one of the most important things is to make sure that your horizontal and vertical lines are perfectly straight. One of the best ways to do this is to line up the end of the ruler perfectly with the edge of the paper so that it keeps your ruler parallel with the other edges of the paper. This is the best way to get your straight lines. So anytime you are drawing lines that should be straight, horizontal, or vertical, you want to make sure you are lining that edge of the ruler so it is perfectly flush with the edge of your paper, perfectly lined up so that your lines are parallel. In the first step of the one-point perspective room I am doing here, I am drawing a rectangle in the center of my paper by using two straight horizontal lines and two straight vertical lines. For all four of these lines, make sure you are lining up that end of the ruler so that your lines are perfectly straight and not slanted or diagonal at all. Once I finish drawing my final line here, you will see my finished rectangle. This is going to become the back wall of my room. When you are drawing your rectangle, it's important that you are considering the size. What is below it will become the floor, what is to the left and the right will become the side walls, and what is above it will become the ceiling. This means the larger you draw your rectangle, the larger you draw your back wall, the less floor space, wall space, and ceiling you will have. So consider how you want your room laid out. Next, you need to put in your vanishing point, which is the most important thing on our paper when we are drawing in one-point perspective. Our left wall, right wall, ceiling, and floor are all moving back in space away from us, so they all need to line up with that vanishing point. To do that, we are going to line up our ruler carefully with the vanishing point and the corner of our rectangle or the corner of our back wall. We are going to draw a line from the vanishing point all the way off the paper. One of the most common mistakes is lining the ruler up with the corner of the paper. You need to line it up with the corner of your back wall or rectangle. The corner of the paper does not matter. Here, I am going to line up with the vanishing point and the corner of my back wall and just start at the corner and go off the paper. This line is really all I need to draw, but for a lot of people, it's easier to draw the entire line. I'm going to show you again here. I start at the vanishing point through the corner and just draw from the corner off the paper. Here I'm going to go back to the first way. I'm lining up with the corner of the rectangle on the vanishing point and drawing the full line. You can decide which way is easier for you, but if you don't draw the full line, make sure you are double checking like this with your ruler that if you line up with the vanishing point and the corner of your rectangle, it is also lined up with that little line you have going off the paper. Next, we are erasing anywhere that the lines are inside or outside the rectangle where they shouldn't be. So we are erasing those diagonal lines first. The lines that go back to the vanishing point are actually called orthogonal lines. So where those orthogonal lines are inside our back wall, we're erasing them. And where our horizontal and vertical lines are outside the back wall, we are erasing those. So that may seem like a lot of erasing and get a little confusing. So you can watch until the end of the erasing step and see what your final piece should look like at this stage. So here, as I clean up from my erasing, you can see that the only horizontal and vertical lines left are around our back wall. Everything else is going back in space. So the other lines are all orthogonal. They go back to the vanishing point because everything else is going back in space. Next, we are going to draw a window on the right wall here. Since the wall is going back in space, so is the window. So the top and the bottom of the window are both orthogonal lines that go back and touch the vanishing point as they go back in space. The left and right sides of the window are straight vertical lines. So we are going to line our ruler up with the bottom or top of the paper to make sure it's nice and straight and draw vertical lines for the edge of the window. Then I can erase the rest of my orthogonal lines. So I am drawing the entire line when I am marking out my window so that I can make sure the angle goes back to the vanishing point. And then I can erase the guides after I put in those vertical lines and don't need to see them anymore. I am going to add one more thing to this window, which is just one more vertical line to add a little more depth. So if we think about how a window is cut into a house, we know that the wall is not as thin as a line. So by adding an extra line, it gives it a little depth and it actually makes the window feel real, like it's cut into something solid. When I go to my window on the left wall, I am still making sure I'm lining up my ruler with the vanishing point, but I am not drawing the orthogonal line all the way to the vanishing point. I am just drawing the top and bottom of my window and lining up the ruler to make straight vertical lines. When you are drawing orthogonal lines, you do not have to connect them all the way to the vanishing point if you are making sure that while you are drawing them, the ruler does connect to the vanishing point. If I want to draw a window on my back wall, I am not worrying about the vanishing point. I am doing straight, horizontal, and vertical lines. Because we are looking at the back wall straight on, it is not going back in space and it does not need to go to the vanishing point. So a window on the back wall will do the same thing. Just straight, horizontal, and vertical lines to make a little window on the back wall. If you want to put a skylight in your room, that needs to be measured back to the vanishing point, just like our windows on the left and right walls. So I'm lining up with the vanishing point and drawing my line off the edge of the paper, and then marking the end of it with a straight horizontal line. The ceiling is going back in space, so anything on the ceiling should point back at the vanishing point. When I am working on the floor, I also need to measure back to the vanishing point. So here I am making a rug. The left and right sides are getting measured back to the vanishing point and then getting cut off with a horizontal line. I could do this for a rug, for a trap door, or maybe I want a window through the floor into the ocean. But regardless, the edges are getting measured back to that vanishing point. Now let's talk about how to draw furniture since we have a really solid base. The first thing I am going to draw is the end of my bed. Since I want it on the floor, I need to make sure I am drawing it in the space that is my floor. So I want my whole end of my bed, my whole rectangle, to be below that line where the wall and the floor meet each other. So I'm drawing a rectangle below that so it looks like it's sitting on the floor, and this will become the end of my bed. Notice that I am still lining up my ruler with the edges of the paper to get those lines nice and straight. Next, I am drawing my mattress back to the vanishing point back in space. I am not starting at the top of the end of my bed. I'm starting a little below since it's the mattress. And I am drawing the top of the mattress and the bottom of the mattress, both as lines that connect all the way to the vanishing point, orthogonal lines. I can divide this space off with a little vertical line here, or I can do that step later. If I do it here, you can see I can get rid of the rest of those lines. When I draw the opposite side of the mattress, I am kind of looking at the same height, and I am again drawing an orthogonal line connecting that whole edge of the mattress back to the vanishing point. Then I can line up with my vertical line and I can connect the left and the right sides of my mattress with a straight horizontal line. This is going to make sure my bed looks like it's going back in space. And now you can see it is crossing over that line between the floor and the wall, so I can erase that where it goes behind and strengthen some of my lines a little bit. This step can be a little complicated, so don't be afraid of rewatching it and taking your time until it clicks. Now the head of the bed is going to be just a rectangle. just like the foot of the bed was, straight on. I just want to make sure that that rectangle is going behind the head of my mattress, which I already measured back in space. Once I have the structure of my bed drawn, I can make it look a little bit more three-dimensional by drawing the edges. These should technically go back to the vanishing point, but since they are very small lines, it's okay to estimate them a little more. But if you're drawing the top of the end and the top of the bed, it's best to use a ruler to make sure that those lines are at least straight. Now that I have the basic structure of my bed, I'm going to do some more erasing. If you have different ideas for your bed, you can customize from here now that this has given you a good base structure of your bed. And after I do some erasing, I'm going to start adding in some details to my bed as well. The next piece of furniture I'm going to draw is a table. The most important thing is to make sure your furniture is always going back to the vanishing point. But unlike the bed with the table, I'm actually going to start with the top of the table. So I am going to draw orthogonal lines, lines that meet the vanishing point for the left and right sides of the table. And then I am going to cut those lines off with horizontal lines to create the top of the table. So I am basically making a floating rectangle first. It looks more like a trapezoid, but that's because it's going back to the vanishing point. So this is what a rectangle, a floating rectangle looks like going back to the vanishing point. And then I am going to add some dimension to it. I am going to thicken it up by adding edges, adding sides. Remember, this side should go back to the vanishing point, but I can base it off of the lines I already drew. And this end is just also straight. And now I can add legs, so it is no longer a floating rectangle. I sketched in the first one. I did that on a few things on the table. It is better to use your ruler to make sure your lines are nice and clean and straight. When I put in the back legs of my table, I actually also want to measure back to the vanishing point from the front legs. So I want to make sure that my back legs look like they are the same length, but going back in space. So I can do that by marking in that orthogonal line. And drawing my back leg to that. And then I'm going to clean up some of the guidelines I don't need anymore. Now for my next step, I am going to put a fish tank on the table. So I am going to start by drawing the end of it that is facing me, just like I did with the bed. So it's just going to be a nice little square. Notice that it looks like it's sitting right on the end of the table. When I draw the sides, they are going back in space, so I'm measuring from the corner of my square back to the vanishing point. One thing that's different than drawing a regular square in perspective is that I am going to draw all four corners back to the vanishing point. Since a fish tank is transparent, I would see that extra line. When I use my horizontal and vertical lines to cut it off, I'm going to make sure I'm ending the fish tank on the table so it doesn't look like it's going over the edge. And I want to connect all of my orthogonal lines so that I am creating a second smaller square back there to make it look like a transparent 3D shape. Erasing can get a little tricky on this one because it's easy to forget what lines you see and what lines you don't. So take your time with erasing. I would start with all of the outside guidelines, orthogonal lines, before you worry about erasing lines inside the fish tank. Since it is transparent, it gets a little confusing. I am going to darken up the edges a little bit so that they look like they have that kind of black plastic border that a lot of times fish tanks or terrariums have. And after I thicken that up a little bit, I am going to add some water and details. So the water on the side would kind of go back to the vanishing point. but water is a little wavy and uneven. So just kind of do your best to follow the shape that you have drawn for your fish tank. And then I'm going to put some little fishies in. If I'm drawing this one in the front, I can draw it just straight on how I would think. I'm going to add some seaweed, and I'm going to add some texture and detail to the bottom of the tank here. When I draw a fish on the side, I kind of want to put it at an angle so it looks like it's swimming straight back towards that vanishing point. The last furniture I am going to show you today is how to draw a floating shelf on the back wall. So, drawing a shelf on the back wall is going to start out very easy with just straight horizontal and vertical lines. I am going to mark in the top, bottom, and sides of the shelf. I am not worrying about details yet. I just want to get that shape in there. After I get the main shape in, I do want to make it look 3D. I want it to look like it's sticking off the wall. So from the sides of the shelf, I am measuring back to the vanishing point. This isn't a poster or a window where it's flat to the wall. A shelf would be coming out of the wall towards us, so we can cut it off with a vertical line there. And now it looks like our shelf is attached to the wall. It's coming from the wall and coming towards us as the viewer. Now I can mark out my actual shelves inside the box. Make sure you're using your ruler to do straight lines. I'm starting as one big box. This would be a great way to do it if you want kind of a big open shelf or a TV, but I'm going to add an extra little line in there to make it into two shelves. Now, the insides of the shelves, if we want them to look three-dimensional, they also need to go back to the vanishing point and get some straight lines in there as well. So you want to measure from that upper corner of the shelf back to the vanishing point, as deep as you want the shelves to be, and then just use horizontal and vertical lines to finish them off. And you can see how dimensional they start to look. I'm going to put just a little bit of shading in here to help you visualize the shelves. You can do some shading here, or you can save any shading for towards the end when you start doing your color. Now, of course, we don't want to just have empty shelves on our wall. You are going to think about things that you want to put on the shelf based on your room design. Are they things you would have? Are they things that go with your theme? I'm thinking I'm going with a little bit of an ocean theme here. So I'm gonna sketch in a shell, a big like conch shell, but I also like to read, so I'm gonna put some books on the shelf as well. At this point, you have a good basic room with some furniture, and hopefully how to draw your furniture in one point perspective is starting to click. So we're going to stop here for today.